Welcome back. It's time now for us to take a look at the rand and other currencies. We did see today, as I said earlier, the rand really are suffering. 14.55 we were at some point, and if you look at that picture now, 10 cents to the good. Let's talk about the factors behind it. I'm now joined by Lukman Otunuga, research analyst at FXTM. He joins us via Skype from London. Lukman, thank you. So we were looking at that rand picture, and I can tell you here in South Africa, everybody would have been very worried because of what it means, obviously, for inflation as well as oil prices. What's behind the retracement that we're now sort of seeing in the rand and other emerging market currencies?
Thank you for having me here again. It's not been the best of trading week for the South African rand. In fact, the local currency has tumbled down the steps thanks to the terrible combination of a broadly stronger dollar, rising oil prices, and renewed concerns over slowing global growth. So these three factors are a recipe for disaster for the local currency. But we have to keep in mind that the rand is not alone, as many other emerging market currencies are also feeling the heat, especially those who are energy importers.
Right. So it's not our factors here in South Africa per se that are driving the valuations that we're seeing on the currencies. It's really a broad brush, if you like, against your emerging market currencies. Why don't you guys like emerging market currencies? What's wrong with us?
Emerging market currencies are good. So looking at the outlook for emerging market currencies, what we can see right now, it's a lot of outlook. So external forces in the form of an appreciating dollar and overall global risk sentiment continues to impact the appetite for emerging market currencies.
Right. So last week, when we were talking about the weakness in the rand, one of the reasons that was cited was that you were looking potentially at a global recession. I don't know to what extent now we can talk about a global recession, given the kind of earnings that we have seen coming out of the U.S., as well as the outlook for global growth going forward. What do you see in terms of factors that are going to drive the rand from here on?
So when we're looking at factors, there's many things we have to put into consideration.
Yeah.
You did bring a positive point that positive earnings are somewhat soothing concerns over slowing global growth. But if we look at recent economic data from Germany, South Korea, concerns over global growth are still a major factor that we still need to look into. At the same time, US-China trade developments will be a very primary driver that impacts the rand's outlook as we move forward towards the second quarter of 2019.
Yeah. What's the perception about the elections that are coming up here on May 8? I mean, we like to think that South Africa is a democracy. That's been established over the past 25 years. And in terms of stability and also in terms of the credibility of the polls, surely those are not in question. But what's the view of people who buy South African assets from there?
As we head towards the election, there's a possibility we can see some election risk, which may create some uncertainty for the South African rand. But moving forward, though, what I would like to see is the reaction after the elections. A very important factor is the fact that if oil prices continue to rise, this would actually feed into fuel prices and possibly food prices, which inevitably may impact interest rates in South Africa.
Yeah. So 14.44 to the dollar we're sitting at the moment. Is that rich? Is that cheap?
I remember you asking me a similar question the last time I was on the air. So we know that the fact that what is actually driving the rand is more to do with external drivers. So if the dollar continues to appreciate and oil prices remain where they're trading right now, the interesting target I'll be looking at will be around 15.00.
Right. So where do you value it now? If you, would you say that it's reflective of the risks facing South Africa and therefore a fair price to be paying for it?
Well, when we're looking at the rand, though, this is going back to what we discussed earlier. What is really driving the rand is more to do with external drivers rather than the domestic conditions in South Africa. For us to come to this conclusion, we need to see where the currency trades after the elections.
Yeah. You know, I've got stock questions when we do these currency interviews. I like to know whether you've changed your mind in terms of where you were at the beginning of the year, about where you see the rand going in 2019. And then, of course, the next question after that is going to be, so what is your forecast for the rest of the year? Where are we going to end come December 31? So let's begin with the first part. Have you changed your mind about where you were at the beginning of the year?
Everything still changes. As we spoke before, what is going to continue driving the rand is both external and domestic factors. We'll be looking to see how the currency reacts to the Federal Reserve, to global growth developments, and of course, US-China trade.
Right. Have you changed your mind, though, from where you were at the beginning of the year? Because we did see the Fed, of course, changing its stance. At the beginning of the year, I think the market was pricing in perhaps one rate hike in the U.S. Now we're not talking about a rate hike at all. Potentially, we're looking at a cut.
So based on the fact that there's a perception that the Federal Reserve could possibly cut interest rates, this will be a welcome development for the South African rand and other emerging market currencies. But as we said earlier, last time we spoke, this will also depend on the perception of global growth. If the United States and China are unable to find a middle ground on trade, and global growth ends up decelerating, naturally this will impact the South African rand.
So December 31, where do you think it will be?
Next time we meet, we'll discuss that. Joe and H2.
He's darking. He's diving. Is the rand the most difficult currency in the world to try to forecast?
No, it's just that the fact that the South African rand, like many other emerging market currencies, right now is really influenced by external drivers. So we need to see how these things play out before we come to a conclusion.
Absolutely. Lukman, thank you for joining us today. That's Lukman Otunuga, research analyst at FXTM. He's joined us via Skype from London. I do remember seeing a report coming through from the IMF saying that the rand, on a GDP-adjusted basis, was one of the most volatile currencies in the world. There you are, just to illustrate how volatile it is. Can you imagine 14.43 to the dollar? We were sitting at 14.55 earlier in the day, and you can see the mountain that the currency has climbed, and hopefully likely where it will go down, and will slip tonight below 14.50 to the dollar, and hope to make some progress tomorrow.